Welcome to Breaking News 247 presents.
After realizing that a famed professor had offended members of the transgender community, a liberal reporter decided to use her time during an interview with the man to try to back him into a corner. Too bad for her. Things would go horribly wrong just a few seconds later, and that's about the time she got absolutely wrecked in 1 minute flat. Jordan Byrne-Peterson is a Canadian clinical psychologist, cultural critic, and professor of psychology at the University of Toronto. He was asked to take part in an interview with the far-left UK broadcaster Channel 4. Up to the challenge, he obliged, but neither he nor his host, Cathy Newman, had any idea of all the event would have in store for them. Speaking on a wide variety of issues, Newman eventually directed the conversation to the issue of free speech, since Peterson had previously been embroiled in controversy when he refused to call members of the transgender community by their desired pronouns. The professor stuck to his guns during the fallout, but it seems that Newman wanted to bring it up again during the most embarrassing interview ever. At least, it was for the host. Laying out her liberal sentiments in the form of a simple question, the host asked Peterson, "Why should your right to freedom of speech trump a trans person's right not to be offended?" First of all, no one has the right not to be offended. In fact, the right to not be offended would fly in direct conflict with freedom of speech. You simply can't have both. That's why there are no such not offended rights outlined anywhere in the Constitution or any other legal document of any kind, not here and not even in much more liberal Canada. With that in mind, Peterson was about to take Newman to task over her ridiculous sentiments, and it didn't take him long. Seen in a video exactly 1 minute in length, Professor Jordan B. Peterson wrecked the liberal host so fast that she didn't even know what hit her. Even better yet, his response was not only downright brutal but brilliant, because in order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive. I mean, look at the conversation we're having right now. You're certainly willing to risk offending me in the pursuit of truth. Why should you have the right to do that? Professor Peterson pointed out, as Paul Joseph Watson with InfoWars reports. You get my point. You're doing what you should do, Peterson continued, which is digging a bit to see what the hell's going on, and that is what you should do. But you're exercising your freedom of speech to certainly risk offending me, and that's fine. More power to you as far as I'm concerned. Despite her best efforts to keep up, Cathy Newman was left completely and utterly speechless as her opponent's argument dismantled her position. "So you haven't sat there?" and she began before a long pause and exasperated sigh. "I'm just trying to work that out," she continued before completely losing her ability to speak as she sat looking utterly dumbfounded. The thing about liberal arguments is that they are only ever applicable if you apply a double standard and remove all rational logic and reasoning. Although the left doesn't want you to hurt the feelings of transgenders, claiming a non-existent right not to be offended, they don't mind offending anyone who goes up against their progressive narrative or liberal agenda to seek out the truth. The First Amendment was actually created in direct contrast to the principles liberals preach today. After all, it would have been pretty offensive to a king if a bunch of regular peasants got together and said they didn't want to be governed by a single entity, right? Non-offensive speech doesn't need to be protected. The First Amendment was created so that we could speak freely even if someone else, even a leader of our nation, doesn't like it. If the right to not be offended existed, who would that right even apply to? Because it can't apply to both sides of a highly debated topic. Would only liberals have the right not to be offended, or would all people? Free speech applies to everyone, and the left is more than happy to claim protection under that. So as long as we can all speak, we simply can't all claim the right to not be offended. There is no way that the left can say the so-called right not to be offended applies to everyone, as they wouldn't be able to do what they do best: attack, insult, and call the right all sorts of names. Rights either apply to everyone or they are not rights at all, and in the end, that's the hard truth Newman so embarrassingly learned most recently.